Welcome, Bianca. I'm so happy that you're here. Finally, we've had a lot of rescheduling to come to this conversation, which we might talk a little bit more about later when we talk about all the divine timing and synchronicity that happened for you to bring your book to life. I am so happy you are here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here today.
Amazing. So, for everyone that is watching or listening, Bianca is a published author who wrote a beautiful book. It happened for me that I was so grateful and honored to be a part of that coming to life. So, we're going to talk about all things about this book, about Bianca's journey, and about all the things inside of it. So, I really want to start with the title of your book. It happened for me. And I want to share a little. I don't think I've actually told you this, but when you first told me the title of your book, It Happened for Me, I interpret it as like it happened for me, like the healing happened for me and it can happen for you too. That was kind of like what I thought you meant. But then the more we talked about what the book was about, the more I read of it, I was like, oh, you mean like it, like the suffering is the it you're talking about, and it happened for you. And I think it's really interesting how people can interpret our art and our words in different ways and take their own meanings. And I kind of like that it has that duality of a meaning as well. And duality is something you explore. So I would love you to talk about your title, how it came to you, what it means to you, and how it captures the essence of what your book is about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting. I've had a few people say, "Oh, what happened for you?" And I'm like, "No, I mean you as in you and I and us and what this really is about." So, yeah, the title came through. I think I messaged you. I had this idea for a really long time, right? We were like back and forth, but I was just really scared to make that step and really get into it. And I think we'd already kind of discussed the story, and I think I was meditating and it just dropped through. And I was like, oh my goodness. I never really knew that this book was going to be about suffering, which is so interesting. I knew I wanted to share the story and I knew I wanted it to be a self help book, but I didn't know that it was really going to be this story of discovering the purpose of suffering. And I think when that title dropped through, I was like, that's it.
Mm.
And that really helped me kind of understand, okay, this is the message that I really want to portray to people for life, that we can truly go through experiences that completely feel like you're going to die, and no lack of exaggeration there, really being down in the dumps and not being able to cope, to actually recalibrating and integrating your whole entire being.
Mm.
And at the same time that the title came through, this message came through to me, which was um, a potent key to your pain is to really discover what's inside of you. So when you really go through painful experiences, it really unlocks everything that's in you that you may have not known that even existed before. Because when you're really suffering at that low level, you have this opportunity to be like, okay, well, there's nothing maybe materialistic left for me to grasp onto. So what else is there? And I literally had to look at my own hands and be like, oh my goodness, you know, all that's left is me. So I have to go within. And so that's where the title really comes from, that whole encapsulation of actually life happens for us. And it gives us this opportunity to know what's going on within me and how can I see all the world and all the potency that I really am. And I
Mm.
think it's a message for everyone. So
Yeah, I love all of that so much. And I think you shared with me, you had like in your note section in your phone, or you wrote it down somewhere, the title, and it was actually like, I think you realized it dropped in a long time before you realized it did. And I think you reached out to me like a full year, at least a full year before we actually started working together. And you were probably thinking about your book a long time before that. So it really was this long time coming thing that kept percolating and simmering to come to life in the way that it did. And even just while you were writing it, the story and like the core message kind of evolved as you wrote more and more and let yourself actually start the process of writing, which I think is a really cool part of your creative journey. Let's talk a little bit more about like the journey of bringing the book to life. And you had, I think, I think you could write a whole story about just the process and the experience of writing this book. Do you want to talk a little bit about the journey from like sitting with the idea for that year or however long it was, coming to the place of feeling ready, the actual process of writing? You can, you know, if you want to talk a little bit about working with me and the support I gave, but also the other support you were calling on, I would just let you talk about the journey in whatever way you want to start.
Yeah, I think I knew I wanted to do this for a really long time. And so I actually put it in, and I do share this in like the preface as well. I put it in an intention jar and I just wrote book coming soon.
Mhm.
And I didn't know why I just knew I had to get this message out of my story, and how it ended up, now I say, happened for me, but I didn't know that I needed to get that part out. And so I put it in that jar. And then I think I asked a couple of people, like, do you know an editor? Because I really struggled with grammar issues and spelling issues and making things make sense and understanding the order of things, because of my chronic illness journey. So it was really tough for me to start, really. I was like, I don't even know where to start, but I have this message and the world needs to hear it and people need to understand it. And so I was blessed enough to have someone give me your details. And I was like, I messaged you and we were going to catch up. And then there was like that year gap. And I think it was through like the pandemic and all of that overwhelm. And I ended up moving to Europe for a little bit. And then when I was moving to Thailand, I was like, this is going to be the time. Like, I'm in this tropical place. There's huge portals there. I'm like, this is going to be the time. And so I think I messaged you like a couple of days before I left, and I was like, hey, I'm going to Thailand and it's time. And I'm quite impulsive like that, to be honest. I'm just like, it's time. I don't know why, but now. And I think that's important as well. You know, sometimes it's good to allow something to sit with you for a period of time so you can get that deep message. Because I
Mhm.
think the book needs a message. We can have a lot of things to say, but it can become a little bit mumbo jumbo. And when we first started, that was probably what it was like a little bit. So we had a little chat and it was really beautiful. You were able to be like, that's okay. I'm going to pop this Word document together. And we had the order of events and like how to start writing and get this really organized. And I feel like you were not only supportive to the grammar and the spelling that I was experiencing, like the issues with, but then you were also really supporting with structure, which I didn't understand or didn't have, an organization, but then on the other hand, energetics, which is really important to me. So
Mhm.
kind of had this perfect match for the support that I needed in all areas. So it's so interesting when we intend something, how all things just start to come together. And it's
Mhm.
really interesting. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better person to guide me through this experience, because you had all the factors that I needed. And sometimes we do need that support to get our message across, to have the organization, to have the helping hand through that. So that was a really beautiful way to start. And I'll never forget, you said to me, just start flowing, just start writing. And then I was just boom, boom, boom. And I think I was someone that's like, is this okay? And like needed a lot of support through it, especially being my first book. I feel like it was just difficult for me to be like, okay, I'm going to trust in this and I'm going to be grounded in this. And I think that it's pretty normal when writing a book and knowing that you're going to share it, that that comes up for you. You're like, is this right? Am I okay with this? Like, does this even make sense?
Yeah.
Especially in the creative journey, we can come up with all of these acronyms and all of these different beautiful metaphors, and then they're like, that doesn't really work. But you were always like, yes, that's great and helpful, and it really supported me to feel confident that, yeah, this is really going somewhere and this is going to be okay.
Mm.
And so I started writing, and I can tell you that I probably had three different books through this process. Like, it was one way, and then I was like, nah, there's more. And I just kept having this feeling throughout the journey that it needed to all come together. And I just had to wait for it to come together. And it was okay if I kept changing it. And I think I changed my mind 100 plus times.
Mm.
A lot of times. The cover was actually like the very last thing, and even that was real. I'm a very indecisive person, so it was like, how are we going to bring all this together? And I feel like you were just speaking of keys, like were the key to like, you know what, this is going to work this way, or this really works that way, and just be able to guide me through that. Because yeah, being the first book was scary. It wasn't just like a beautiful journey that's like all rainbows. Like it was
Mm.
tough, and you're putting yourself out there. You're gonna be judged. You're gonna go through, especially if you have childhood wounding and things like that. It brings up all the shadow. For me, it brought up a lot of my shadow, like a lot of it. And I definitely know that you would have seen those parts, just like the anxious attachment and like fear and oh my god, I'm going to be seen and heard.
Perfectionism.
Oh, perfectionism. Yeah, that was massive. I think that was one of the biggest things. But then it also allowed me to come into acceptance of that, because as it ended up happening exactly how it was supposed to in the end. And that three-part series just kind of came together, or that three parts in the book, where I was like, it needs to come together, but I'm not sure how. And yeah,
Mm.
you were a great guide for that.
Yeah, and it was so beautiful seeing the book take form slowly. I think what is now mostly part one of your book, I read that part like the most times because that was kind of like your first flow state where it's mostly just telling your story and what happened. And even the first time I read it, even though, like you said, there were those a lot of grammar things to move through, and it was like a little time consuming for me to like fix all of those little things, the story was still so captivating and engaging and deep and beautiful, and like still held like that. Like it was such a beautiful foundation to start your book with. And even though like the first read through took me a really long time, but then the third read through just flowed so smoothly and was just so beautiful. And it was just such an incredible experience to see that evolution of your book, to see like the flow of the writing become just like so smooth and amazing in the final read through, but also for the message to become so much deeper and for you to expand on so much of it as well. And I think you giving yourself so much more space than you may have originally intended for your book to be published in allowed you to kind of dive in deeper to a lot of points, especially within your own story. And that really kind of uncovered part three. I think you spending more time with those part one and twos in your book. And you'll have some space, I'll give you some space to share like some themes and parts of the story. But I really encourage everyone listening to read the book, because Bianca's story is something that cannot be summarized into a sentence. Like you really need to read how everything unfolded. And it is very, like, I use the word captivating a lot for your story because it just hooks you in and you just need to know what happens next. And you tell it really beautifully, and you draw all the really beautiful lessons out of what happened to you as well.
Thank
Mm.
you so much. That's so lovely.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about like divine synchronicity and the timing of everything that happened? And um yeah, just like the flow of events of bringing this book to life. Was it what you expected? Did you need to kind of like loosen your attachment to the timeline? I'll let you talk about all the timing things that came up for you.
Yeah, I feel like I really wanted to hit so many targets. I think we changed dates 100 times. And I was like very hooked on the spirituality side of like numbers being so potent. And
Mm.
in the end, it didn't happen that way. And I think that you shared this with me a long time ago. It's like, it's almost like giving birth. Like, you can't plan the date. I mean, you can have a C section, but you can't really plan the date. Like, it has to be birth when it's supposed to be birth. And that's when the portals open. And I think it's nice to have a structure and be working towards that structure. But I think it's okay to just loosen your grip when it comes to, I need it to be this date. And I found something that kept coming up for me was like, oh, like it was almost like those wounds again popping through that we all have, was like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not able to meet that deadline. And that did happen a few times. And I had to just let go of that resistance and like meet myself in my heart, in my soul, and say, that's not true for you. It was actually a very beautiful self development process for me as
Mm,
well. I feel like I had a complete upgrade after that too, because you can't bypass your shadow through this experience.
mm,
Um, but when it was time, it was just time. I can't explain it. It was like, I'm in labor, it's happening. I
yeah.
didn't know that week before that it was coming out that week. It was like, I think it's happening now. And I think that's really beautiful about self publishing as well.
Mm,
Because, like, you can just let your, like, you don't have this structure of like a company and a time and all this pressure, which I'm not against in any stretch of the word. But I love that, yeah, I was able to choose that. And I could just be my impulsive self that likes to know my soul that, oh, it's time to birth this. So,
mm,
yeah, I think if anyone's thinking of writing, it's beautiful to have the structure and the timing and have a plan, but just be kind to yourself and know it's got its own body and soul of its own, and it knows when it's time, and
mm.
you'll know as well. So just allow it to flow through.
Yeah. And your book is like just as powerful as it will be like a week, a month, 3 months between publishing it now or later. Like your book will still be such a powerful thing. And I know that like sometimes our little minds are so conditioned to just want to tick things off the list and like get it done, get it off my plate. But it is such like this sacred creative journey of bringing a book into the world, and especially a book like yours that told such a like it was so personal and it was so important to at a collective level as well. Um, so to hold that sacred and to hold it within you as long as it needs to be held until it's fully cooked, fully ready to be birthed is so important. Um, is there anything else you want to talk about in when it came to like the experience of writing your book, or do you want to talk a little bit more about what's inside the book?
But I think that it was really difficult to share parts of me that I'd never told even family members.
Mm,
And it's so interesting because like even people we meet now in Europe, like I people are sharing my book, and people are reading these deepest, darkest times of my life. And not just, the story, but like the personal details that I did end up sharing. And I think that that was really scary. So I do want to shed a little bit of light on that wasn't just like easy for me to share all of that. But
mm,
then that ended up being the potency that allowed me to grow so much in that year as well. Since it's been I think about 5 months now, and it feels like it's been about a year because things have grown really, really fast since doing that. So I would say to fight the fear for anyone that's wanting to do that, and just allow it to come through, because that process was difficult, but I was like, you know what, this needs to be shared. It's an important part that's going to help people. But it
mm.
was scary. So I
Yeah.
think it's okay to know that fear is normal, you know?
And I think that is something we had like kind of this ongoing conversation about for a little while around like what details to include, especially when other people may have been involved in certain stories, or other people could have a potential reaction to something you were sharing even about yourself. And I think something I told you at the time was around like one, like you are the narrator of this book, like you get to frame the story in whatever way you want, and sometimes it's okay to tell a story and leave out certain details, but sometimes the specific details are really important to convey what you actually want to say in the story. And it's really important to find that balance of, sometimes you can leave things to the imagination, but sometimes you want to be very clear that this is what happened and I don't want to leave that up for interpretation. Do you feel like it was just a process of sitting with it, moving through the fear and the vulnerability, or do you remember there being like a specific point where you were like, okay, like this is okay to share this?
I think it was actually, it was a little bit triggering, as I said. Like, it was triggering to write it, and I did change. And there's one specific part that we're obviously talking about, like the deepest, darkest time of my life, and I didn't know like how to really get it out and get it clear and share that message. But I feel like what helped in that moment was to just write it all out and let it out, and just then you could play with different parts that felt good. And it was nice to have you there to read it, to be like, is this going to trigger you? And then I came back to the reality of, I guess that's what polarity is. Like, we kind of need that trigger and that awakening to touch those points. So
Mm.
I think that I did it anyway, and I wrote it and I got it out on the paper, and then I knew I could always adjust if need be. And then there was a part where I just had to let go and surrender and say, you know what, it's there and it's going to help someone, and that someone might be more important than my fear.
Yes.
So
Oh my God, I
that's
love
the question. Yeah.
that. Yeah. And I'm sure there are many someones who are reading it that are like the moment they're reading it in is so much bigger than your fear. And I love that you're able to tap into that. There's this quote that I really love that it's like art is supposed to make the comfortable uncomfortable. And sometimes sometimes there can be that fear come up that like I don't want to trigger people or make them uncomfortable in reading about my life or what I have to say, but them being uncomfortable, even if it's just like a little bit of that, is of service to them. And it's on them where they move through that uncomfortableness, like within themselves, whether they let it be expansive or whether they shut your book and throw it in the bin. Either way, like that's their experience to have. And you just letting yourself be in that flow state of writing it and expressing it. And I'm so happy you said that, because I think that is the most important thing. Like sometimes the fear can seem so much bigger in our mind before we actually write it down and see what it would look like and see how we could tell that story. It kind of dispels some of that fear and then gives us the space to sit with the vulnerability of it. So yeah, that was, and this applies to so many people that are writing books that contain stories about their own life. Like, of course, there are moments where, we may not want certain people to know those things about us or anyone to think of us differently when they read these thoughts that we've had or these experiences that we've had. But it is liberating to ourselves and to many other people that will read it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so important. Just do it. Just write it. Just get it out, get it done, and you can always adjust.
Yeah, and you can even choose to scrap it or to expand on it or yeah, but write it first. Amazing. Is there any part of your book that you want to share, whether it's a theme, a topic that you cover, or a part of your own story? Do you want to give everyone just like a little taste of some things that they could find and experience within your book?
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you like a little background. Basically, the whole message is to discover the purpose of suffering to transform your life, to understand these levels of life, and to understand that all of it is normal and all of it's okay. And we're not trying to fix ourselves. We're trying to come into the acceptance and the remembrance of who we truly are. And I think that's the most potent part to share. Like, that is that understanding. Because I think the biggest thing that I had going through my journey was, why me? Why am I suffering? Why am I going through this? And when I could break through that and see life in this different way, I was able to just come into the acceptance of all parts of myself. And I would love that for anyone existing, especially in the planet right now, where there's a lot going on. And it's really beautiful to understand this way of life, because it is life, and we have been a little bit misconstrued through programs and conditioning as to happiness being the only part of life that truly matters, when we're kind of not accepting all parts of life, and it can be really difficult to live in that realm. And so my book is really the journey of my chronic illness, and how I became homeless, and how I couldn't walk, and how I had to relearn a lot of things in my life. And it really shares the polarity and the darkness to then invite you on this journey of recalibration, and how I was able to remember that there was so much more to life. There wasn't just this material realm or this need for outside sources. There was this internal relationship that I could have with myself that transformed my life. And then I speak through the book about these keys, almost like I was going through this journey and picking up all of this wisdom and this knowledge to then be able to turn it into a self-help book for others to be able to integrate those lessons that really helped me, and a way of life and a daily choice and a new way of being that allows me to have ease. It doesn't mean that we are always in the realm of happiness, like I said, but it allows us to accept all layers of emotions, energies, experiences, because we understand, oh, this has to happen in order for me to get to where I really want to be, in order for me to wake up out of whatever I'm in. And sometimes we have to lose everything in order to find those parts of ourselves. And so, yeah, it's really that acceptance of the duality and the polarity of life.
Mm. And that is such a really beautiful introduction to like the essence and the journey that everyone gets taken on reading your book. And the detail of it is just, I feel like everyone just has to read it. Get a copy of the book. The link will be in the show notes. But yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you want to talk a little bit about the experience since publishing your book? So you hit published, you quickly arose to some high numbers on like best-selling lists. I think you got to, was it number 2 on a few lists? Which is like amazing because that's like overall bestsellers. And I know that there's been so many flow on and ripple effects for you as well. So I actually haven't spoken to you about this, so I don't know if you have anything to share, but around like the feedback of other people reading your book, like I'll let you talk about what has been like the ripple impact since putting your book out in the world.
Yes, it's so interesting. It was that very fear of writing that specific chapter that called a lot of people my way. Just circling back to that for a moment, so many people are like, I'm so glad you wrote about that part, because that part just made me feel seen and heard. And previously, people were like, well, you only see so much on social media with your audience. And they were like, well, I just thought you were extremely positive, and I wasn't actually able to relate until I read your book and I understood, oh my goodness, like she understands from that point of view. And so some people even said to me, like, the thoughts that you have are like, I felt like I was reading my own story. So it's so interesting when we're willing to go there, how much that really helps people. And yeah, speaking of, it did really well on Amazon. I was really surprised. It went straight away to like #1 new release in a lot of different topics. I was like, wow, is this really happening? And it was really exciting. It was really rewarding to know that that happened at the same time of working that hard and then seeing that result. I don't think that that would be the driving force for me again. Like, it was rewarding and it was beautiful, but it's not why I did that. You know, it was just an extra bonus on top of everything else. And for all those hours that we worked hard on doing this, it was like, oh wow, okay, this was supposed to happen like that. So yeah, it was really rewarding to have that. And then how it's supported me now is just, I had an influx of clients. I now do group courses. It's changed a lot of the way that I'm doing things. And yeah, I think that that's the main little parts there, that it's really supported people to come. I think, yeah, I think that I found more aligned clients, people that are like, okay, like I get you and I know your deepest story and I know your whole, experience. So like we align, and it kind of called those people in that are like, oh, I'm willing to go on this healing journey now. I understand that there's not, because I think what a lot of people experience when they're going through healing is sometimes that, someone's reached a certain level and it can be like a deterrence of, oh, I'm not enough to like get to that level. And it can be like this almost resistance for people who have suffered and do have wounding. and don't know those sides of you. So I think it invited people to be like, oh, you have that too. And I can also get to this point of healing my life and not living in this overwhelm anymore. So yeah, it invited more aligned people in, and yeah, really grateful for the extra bonus of it doing well.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful how like it really put a spotlight on more of who you are, but also almost like projected this transmission out in the world that it could attract more people to you. You need, like, I can't remember the exact word count of your book, but it was at least 50,000 words. And it's like you needed that much space to actually really tell your story. And there is only so much of it you can tell in little snippets. And some of like the darker parts of your story and like the more the things that are kind of for you part of your past but still part of your story, it's like there isn't a place to mention those things all the time in the work you're doing now, I feel. So yeah, they wouldn't know that unless they had this deep dive exploration. And a book is just such a powerful way to really share the depth of like this is who I am now, but there is so much depth within what made me who I am now, what shaped me into what I'm doing now and sharing with the world. So I love that so many people have connected to you in that way, and found you. And I just love seeing all the success you're experiencing now. And like your book was a contributor and like a catalyst, but it was all you and all your story all along. And I'm so happy that you're experiencing that abundance that came from all that effort you put in your book. And I've worked with a lot of people to bring their books to life. And I like have to say you are one of the ones that, you really worked hard for your book. Like it was just the detail and the care that you put into it was next level. And like everyone I've worked with has love and care and work for their book, but you were just such, yeah,
Perfection.
a different level of like yes, there was that level of perfectionism, but sometimes it was, a lot of the time it was harnessed in a way that added quality to your book. Definitely things that we worked on to let go of, but yeah, like the care that you put into every word and every story, I think is really felt by everyone that holds your book and experiences the energy and reads your book. So it's just like I'm so proud of you, and I hope you really feel that pride within yourself for sharing this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was so lovely to hear that. And I'm just grateful I could not have done this without you. And I would say to everyone listening, if you feel like you have an idea and you don't have someone to help guide you and it feels confusing, it's like the best it's the best thing that I could have done. I would not have had it out without you. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you.
So great.
Um, what else would you have to say to someone who is thinking of writing a book and telling their story within their book?
Yeah, I write about this in the beginning as well, a little bit. Like I touch on it being this, like, don't stop yourself because you feel different. That is the potency. Your difference is your unique song, it's your unique message. It's like the sprinkle on top of everything else. And
Mhm.
sometimes we kind of hold ourselves back because I can't do this because my grammar's not up to scratch, or I can't do this because XYZ, or like my message is not good enough, or whatever those stories are that you're telling yourself. I would invite you to let go of them and allow that to be a part of your story. You don't need to hide those parts that feel like sticky or whatever that is, because we all have a shadow. We all have that darker side to us. And when we invite it up to be seen and heard and say, okay, it's okay that you feel this way, it's the biggest sprinkle on top of everything else.
Mm.
Now I can say, even though I couldn't write this, I was able to invite Rachel in to help me bring this message to the world. And that is special because it's like, that was the unique color or song that I had. And I would say, just go for it. Allow that to come up. You can write about that part in your preface, and someone else is going to be invited to do their journey because you spoke about the ugly side that you felt needed a cover, but it doesn't. It just needs to be unlocked, shared, and then others are like, oh, now I can do it too. And so it just invites this ripple effect. We all have these parts of us that we want to keep safe, but I invite you to bring them up and do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. And that story and that part of the writer is the most powerful thing. The writing, as like the skilled and like the grammar and all of that for the writing can always be edited and improved and more flow brought in. But it's the actual story and the energy of that story that only the person who has experienced that story can write. So I love that advice of just, yeah, owning their differences, and allowing themselves to go into that flow state. And there is always support in to support whatever area they feel like there may be need help in to bring it to life. So I love that. Oh my God. Oh, I feel like I was about to say something, but it just flew out of my mind. Is there anything else that you would really love to talk about in this conversation?
I would say that also on that note as well is the it allows more freedom. And I think I shared this with you at the time. Like once I was holding on to this idea. You can imagine we have all these plans for ourselves, our dreams, our goals, all of this stuff is like in our mind and in our heart. And we're constantly thinking of them over and over again, like how can I get this out? And it's like something that's like always there. And
Mm-hmm.
once I like brought it out, birthed it, it allowed so much space in my mind and my heart to not only get on a deeper level of self connection, but like a deeper level of my mission and my purpose. Because it's like, oh, it wasn't something that I needed to think about doing later. And that's also okay. There is things that are there.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me to just birth it and then have all these other ideas come up and then
Yes.
have all these new plans that I've been working on for the last 5 months now that I probably wouldn't have done if I didn't get this out, because it's like, oh no, 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 like I'm saving that space for just writing.
Mm.
And so I'd say get your dreams out because it allows so much freedom in your mind. Like you don't
Mm.
understand. It's
Yeah,
so free.
definitely. And even just in the book writing journey, actually letting yourself write and start writing frees up the space where there's many little micro decisions that need to be made when writing your book and publishing a book, and freeing up the space with the story you want to tell and the things you want to write about allows all those little decisions to feel a lot easier, because it's like, oh, there isn't this like long list that's been clogged up by, I can't address any of this until I write this big thing. But once you let that out of your mind, then all those little decisions, they just feel easy or they feel manageable in the moment. And yeah, I loved what you shared, that once the book was done, it kind of opened this overflow of all the other things and kind of maybe even created a more refined filter in what is it that you really want to focus on post book. So I love that advice as well. Do you have a copy of your book next to you or with you?
I do, yes.
Do you have like a little part that you would like to read?
Sure. I love this one. I don't know why I had a like intuitive feeling that you would ask me that. So I was like, I'm gonna mark my favorite bit. I did already share this one on my Instagram, but I'll go for it.
Go for it.
So when you endure suffering, you're in the darkest of life's experience, and it's hard due to the feelings associated with it. Yet the experience, when validated by ourselves and choosing to reconnect to our heart, is the creation of wisdom for the world. That's probably my favorite paragraph ever. That one's, yeah.
I love that. Is that,
Keep
is that
going. I can read
yeah,
more.
keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, I love this part as well. So I think that this is really a great part that I had to come to a decision to realize why we suffer as well. So all we need is the understanding and modalities to observe our life, to detach from the previous meaning we gave suffering. Through this, it is entirely possible to transform your suffering into internal and external power, providing a life where you're more in flow, knowing yourself as the love that you are. I fought suffering only to see that it was not going anywhere. only to notice that it had its place, that it is something that we can overcome through a deeper perspective and is not to punish us. I could learn to live with it when I understood its depths and how it was possible for all of us to do the same. No matter what shows up in your life as suffering for you, there is always a way to get through it, understand it, and allow it to lead you to the remembrance of who you are. When I finally understood this, there it was. I had it revealed to myself all along. It was happening for me. Don't underestimate the hard times in life, for they have so much depth within them. They will always give you an opportunity when we widen our lens to see the way through suffering is always within. Thank
I love that so
you.
that is so beautiful. Do you want to hold the book up for anyone who's watching the video?
Sure,
It
sure,
is
sure.
so beautiful. Um, that's all right.
Video. There we go. Little
It's so
backdrop.
beautiful. I love the look of your book and you on the cover. Amazing. Do you want to share how can everyone get a copy? How can they connect with you? Where can they find all the things about you and the book?
Yeah, so you can just follow me on Instagram if you like, or any socials at Bianca's Holistic Way, or my website, biancasholisticway.com. You can get it from all major book publishers, bookstores, I should say, and Amazon. Most people just grab it on Amazon because you can get it quickly, or you can even get the ebook as well, the
Yeah.
Kindle version.
And I'll have all the links in the show notes. So you can just click on them to get the book or to connect with Bianca. Thank you so much for being here. I have absolutely loved this conversation with you, and I just always love being around your beautiful energy. The final thing, if you had just 30 to 60 seconds to share one thing with everyone in the world, what do you think it is that you would say?
I would say that the way through your suffering is within. And if you can go to those depths of yourself and take the time to feel your emotions and be with those parts of yourself and allow all of it to come
Mhm.
through, and allow that to be your medicine, and allow that to be your mission, and share those deepest parts of yourself, then you can really not only have a beautiful life for yourself, but impact a lot of people's lives as well. So don't be afraid of those parts of you that you maybe want to keep down in the closet. Bring them up, share them, and know that everything you need is within you.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. So powerful. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much, everyone who is here listening.